All right, I'm just like setting up YouTube live as well. Let's take a little bit. Just 1 second. All right, I'm just like setting up YouTube live as well. All right, so that delay is going to be there. Okay.
I don't know why there is some note option or something.
What was that, Abhi?
There is something happening when I'm sharing my screen. It would be great. I would request everybody in the audience, it would be great if you can mute yourself. Thank you.
Ruth, also on the top, you can find like admit all.
Yeah. It's just the fact that people are joining in kind of one by one.
Right. Cool. Abhishek, will start. Ruth?
Yeah.
Sure.
Sounds good. Yeah, just before starting, I would request everybody in the audience if they can mute yourself if you haven't. Thank you so much. And I hope you guys can hear me now well enough.
Yeah, you have to be a little louder, Abhishek.
Okay, I will try to. I will try my best.
Okay, I hope this isn't a problem. Okay, great. I'm gonna start recording. And all right, welcome everyone. My name is Moses Sampal, part of Quantum Computing India. As you all know, we have been doing something called Quantum Winter in November and December, along with BosonQ Psi. And so how it's essentially structured is, Abhishek, if I can share my screen for a bit. Right. All right, so almost everyone here has registered to Quantum Winter. That's why you're here. So this all happened because one of the apprentices that who has been working with us for the last 3 months, he also started interning with BosonQ Psi, and he told us about Boson, and the same thing he's told Abhishek about what we as a community are trying to do. By the way, we are in the process of registering Quantum Computing India as a non-profit foundation because our goal is still the same, our vision is still the same, which is to take quantum knowledge to the masses, right? So learning from the previous mistakes of what has happened with cutting edge technologies, be it blockchain, be it the internet, so to speak, which is always left behind the lowest rung of the pyramid, so to speak, right? The socioeconomic level wise. So when we started Quantum Computing India, our vision was really to make sure that reaches everyone without language barrier, without socioeconomic barriers as well. And so that's Quantum Computing India's vision. So as a community, what we essentially are trying to do is build a continuous or lifelong learning process, right? So it happens essentially through facilitator series where people with experience comes and shares their knowledge with us. And the second thing happens mostly on Sundays, which is peer learning series, where the current set of teams that we have, the quantum cryptography team, the quantum machine learning team, and the quantum finance team, they log their week's journey on every Sunday. So that's how it happens. And one of the reasons why we also started exploring these 3 domains is because, the quantum finance essentially has a very clear use case. So one of the use cases that we are working on is portfolio optimization for options in the futures market, right? And the second one is quantum cryptography. And right now, we are in a very interesting use case, which is securing communication between unmanned aerial vehicles. So basically, there are like these swarms of UAVs or drones. How do they talk to the base, and how do they talk to each other, and how can you make that communication, the two-way communication, more secure using quantum cryptography is one thing that we're exploring. And the third thing is quantum machine learning team. And this is the most sought after stream, at least within quantum enthusiasts in India, right? Like even if you look at the fellowships that people have applied for, almost 60% have applied for quantum machine learning. All right. So now coming to quantum winter. So this person kind of connected both Abhishek and us together and said, hey, it looks like what both of you are doing is has a lot of synergies. And one way to look at that in the future is see how we as a community, because we are creating this lifelong learning community. So which means you're creating a supply of quantum related skills, right? Now that supply has to move to the market space, right? So that's one of the reasons why we are so excited about BosonQ Psi, because this whole series of 6 weeks in itself is an experiment. Because if you really think about it, for a startup like BosonQ Psi, who requires people who understands the very fundamentals of physics and multiphysics and doing simulations, like which could be around the CFDs or like computational fluid dynamics or computational heat transfer. So these are concepts that like mostly physicists or masters in physicists would be doing, physics would be knowing, and the quantum is like another whole arena, right? So a mix of these two things has never happened, and like there's no master's degree or undergrad degree that kind of specializes in multiphysics simulations per se, right? So how do you bring these two things together? So the goal was essentially to make more people aware of there's a startup, there's a very nice use case based startup, which is BosonQ Psi, which is what we'll be discussing today. And the second thing is, how do you make sure that people with physics understanding understands the quantum part of it, and people who knows quantum, like people who are like dabbled with Qiskit, people who are dabbled with QDK, whatnot, right? They understand the other side of multiphysics, so that like these two things merge together, right? So that's essentially the idea behind this whole 6 week of hackathon, so to speak. So we start off with like the basics of multiphysics, so CFDs, CHTs, and structural dynamics and electromagnetics, which is very interesting. Sorry, when did that happen? Right now?
Yeah, I believe it was my fault. My bad.
Okay, all right, okay. Okay, so the idea is to make people understand the different concepts that are being used in solving the problem that BosonQ Psi is trying to address in the short term to medium term, right? So that's essentially the angle in which we are starting Quantum Winter. And since we are essentially going to be working with BosonQ Psi for the next 6 weeks, it's logical to start with understanding what BosonQ Psi does, what's the problem it's trying to solve, and the team behind that, right? Like at the end of the day, it really comes down to the management team or the core team that's putting together a massive team in the future to work on this problem, right? So we'll essentially be talking about Abhishek and Ruth and how did they meet, like what are their backgrounds, and what do they have in store for BosonQ Psi, how it all started, and where are we going with that? Okay, so that's the context in which we are meeting. Thank you for joining, and I hope you guys will be continuous in terms of attending all these sessions. We'll keep you guys posted in terms of what are the minimum requirements to even get into the hackathon part itself. Okay, so with that as an intro, I'm gonna let Abhishek take over. And Abhishek, if you can start off with a quick intro about yourself and yeah, what you have in store for us. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, sir, for the great introduction. I hope I'm much audible now. Okay, great. So thank you, everyone. I know it has been a great effort by QCI and our recent partners, ISCFD, to put everything, this whole event together in a quick time. So thank you, Sam, and thank you, the team of QCI, for giving us the chance to speak here about what BosonQ Psi is. So first of all, before even going into what BosonQ Psi, I just want to explain what our logo means. Because for many, this is a mystery still. So if you see, BQP is what we say as our short name. So you see the B here, this part, and then the Q, and then you have the psi, which P represents the psi symbol in quantum mechanics. So this is the mystery behind our logo. And moving on to that, we have a very nice motto, enabling simulations for quantum paradigm. Our team spent a lot of time figuring this out for a lot of places, because this really tells what we want to do as this startup. And once we really launch, we will look forward to making this a big success. So just to introduce everyone, here we have our team. It's me, Abhishek Chopra, the founder and the CEO, as well as Ruth, who is joining me for this talk. But behind the scenes, you will meet soon through the Quantum Winter event and other places in social media and LinkedIn everywhere. We have Hassan Azmat, who's the co-founder and COO. We have Jash Minocha, who's the co-founder and the CFO. Then we have a great marketing team led by Rajat Issar, our Chief Marketing Officer, and Shreya Jaswal, Head of Marketing, who have put a lot of effort in bringing this Quantum Winter event and the posters that you guys see and all the things that creating that hype. And then I would like to thank our quantum advisor, Dr. Arish Pichai from Christ University, who has recently joined us. Moving on, just to give a brief idea about who I am and what's my background, and then Ruth will introduce himself a bit. So currently I'm a PhD student at Rensselaer Polytech Institute in US. I'm pursuing my PhD in aerospace engineering with specialization in computational fluid dynamics, or developing computational fluid dynamics code for high performance computing applications, mainly like supercomputers and everything, where I basically see something called as rotorcraft application, as in these new generation electric VTOL flights, as well as helicopters and everything. Like, so that's my domain of specialization in research. I was very fortunate to get my bachelor's from Rutgers University in US, where I met Ruth and Hassan, these amazing people. And it's not new to us that we have been discussing idea, or we are working as a team. We have been doing that for quite a while now. We have done amazing projects together. Our first project together was something that we went to NASA for, and the story began from there, I would say. But essentially, it was me, Hassan, Ruth coming together with this background in aerospace engineering, and then just joined that, okay, this could be definitely a startup. Let's go and do something about it. And then the team just went on. So I don't have my technical team here, but I would like to thank each and everyone in our technical team who are working day and night to make this whole thing happen behind the scenes. So Ruth, if you would like to introduce yourself, please.
Sure. Thank you, Abhishek. Thank you, everyone, for joining this presentation. I'm Ruth Lineswala. So currently, I'm a PhD student here at University of Minnesota. In my PhD, I do similar work as Abhishek, where I'm in computational fluid dynamics. However, the application is a little bit different. So in my group, what we do is we also work on high fidelity computational fluid code. However, the application is for hypersonics. So you can think of anywhere from like space shuttles to re-entry vehicles, or even like leaving and as well as re-entry vehicles, rockets, whatever of that sense. As well as these futuristic, almost like experimental aircrafts, where we look at there are many challenges that come with when you go extremely fast, and because the flow inherently is turbulent or very chaotic, the physics behind it is incredibly complicated, and that's why we rely on this kind of multiphysics or even the computational aspect, because as you can see, more and more the computational aspect is increasing, because the experiments cost a whole lot of money to just get the facility ready, and you guys soon will realize that the problem with experiment is that they're very confined to only or couple of scenarios, because it's really hard to it's really difficult to make a experimental facility that can be kind of wide range. Let's say from like simulating something like, let's say flow around the car versus flow around the airplane or flow around the rocket, because the scales of things just extremely change, and you cannot just have one facility that takes care of all of it. However, when you go into the computational realm, that is possible because only thing that changes is everything is inside our computer. So externally, nothing does have to change. Everything that changes is the software. So what we are trying to do at BosonQ Psi is to make a software which not only is focused on computational fluid dynamics, which is one portion of the multiphysics simulation, but like there are many other portions that we're gonna also dive into that can do from, you're gonna see the examples, but like from the smallest of things. So like we can even do how like the microbacterial growth happens, to the biggest of thing of like looking at uh Saturn V, or if you guys are into aerospace industry at all, like the Falcon Heavy, or simulate all that and anything that comes in between, because we do the multiphysics community is such a broad field. We essentially, if you for the whatever you guys have like have experienced within the past 30 minutes, I will almost certainly say that you guys, somebody in the past has done multiphysics simulation on that, whether it be HVAC system, the computer cooling system, how the modeling of how like let's see, the dust that's coming onto the your laptop or computer, whatever it might be. So the multiphysics is a wide range. And so a little bit about like my background. As Abhi mentioned, I got my Bachelor of Science in aerospace engineering at Rutgers University, which is where I met Abhishek and Hassan. And yeah, as Abhi mentioned, we worked on many projects together, from from like regular old school projects to even having our senior design, as well as external competitions that we as a whole participated in and achieved many great things. But yeah, we're all excited to share this presentation to you all. And if you guys have any questions, just let us know in the chat, or feel, or like wait until the end, because we are trying to keep everybody mute just in case, like if somebody becomes unmute and we don't want any background noise. So yeah, just hit us up on the in the chat. And yeah.
Thank you, Ruth, for that introduction. So now you know the team, and let's get to what we actually do, which is like the big question. So let's see. Just to introduce the, as Ruth pointed out nicely, that we are trying to essentially bring this whole new dynamic, cutting edge. Uh, what all adjectives can I use for this amazing field of quantum computing and multiphysics simulation? This is a niche market segment, I would say, from both the aspects, because quantum computing haven't been seen from multiphysics side, as well as multiphysics haven't been seen from quantum computing aspects. So so as Ruth was talking about, building on from there, the field of multiphysics essentially can be divided into six different domains. We have heat transfer, structural mechanics, fluid dynamics, acoustic, chemical reaction, and electromagnetic. Now, the applications of each field of multiphysics can be wide variety. Let me just take an example of like electromagnetic. It could be anything, something with like designing new kind of batteries for electric aircrafts or electric cars, or it could be as big as astrophysics, like looking at planetary motions and like understanding different domains in astrophysics. So similarly, every domain of multiphysics simulation has its own application, as well as now what is happening is multidisciplinary research. For example, fluid with structures, structures with heat transfer, which you will see when Ruth will present in subsequent slides. So let's for now focus on multiphysics, and more importantly on fluid dynamics. So this whole field of fluid dynamics is governed by this holy grail equation of Navier-Stokes. Now, this whole Navier-Stokes equation is actually a very difficult equation to solve, given its property that it's a unsteady nonlinear partial differential equation. So what happens is we cannot solve it analytically. Like you cannot go and use your math book and just solve this. So either you can do experiments or you can do something as computational. So that's why this whole field of computational fluid dynamics began from. In this field, what we do is basically we take this we'll take this equation and let's imagine for now you have a domain with an aircraft inside it, and let's separate this whole domain into small boxes. In each of these small boxes, you try to solve this equation using some models, which is shown in the triangle. Now, RANS, which stands for Reynolds Average Navier Stokes equation, is the most industrial standard, I would say, because the computational cost is very low. When I say computational cost, I mean the if you are using a supercomputer, let's say, or even your normal computer, and together how much time you spent, and as well as time is money now for many industries. So RANs could be like very easily can be solved, and it's not time taking, as well as the cost associated with it is about like let's say $150. Now, if you go to a higher accuracy, which is like LES and DNS, which gives you very good mimic of the physics that is going on, because it has lot less number of assumptions involved, the computational cost gets very high. And very high, I mean like in if you let's say do the same simulation that I talked about, like for $150 in RANs, LES, it will go up to like $150,000, and for DNS it could go to like $15 million. And I'm not kidding about that. This is like the prices and things that actually come using like when you're using supercomputers, and even with using that many supercomputers, you take about months to finish this kind of simulations. So let me give you the example of how extreme these simulations can get. Here I'm showing a geometry of a tail, just the tail of an aircraft. Again, let's imagine you have a box inside this, like you have a box, and inside that you have the geometry of this tail. You discretize this whole tail geometry into very small boxes, and you basically try to run this simulation to understand what happens when a flow moves past this tail of the aircraft. Now, this example that I'm showing here was actually worked out in the current code that I currently use in my PhD, which is the faster code. And we use the LES model. So LES model, just going back, is the second highest in terms of computational cost and accuracy. So in this, what happened was we discretized this into like about, I think so 150 crore boxes, like the small boxes, which we call as elements in terms of a computational when you're speaking. But to model that much, we used about 3 million parallel processors. And thanks to Argonne National Labs Mega Supercomputer, that's where we basically use this model as, like where we simulated this model. But even with such high computational costs, it took about, I would say, 5 to 6 months to finish that simulation, which is like very expensive. And it is said by the experts in the field of computational fluid dynamics that the full aircraft simulation is not possible. I'm not saying not possible in terms of that it cannot be solved. I'm saying not possible in terms of that we don't have that much computational power, even taking into account like such big supercomputers that we have currently. And this current and this LES simulation for a full aircraft is not possible until 2050. And the reason is because, again, we need that much computational resources to do so. So, and this you can see, like you can see from your day-to-day life. Imagine when you first saw the picture of an aircraft, how much has the aircraft changed now? Barely, I would say. The design is same, and you can take the same example for cars. Like when cars first came into the cars, now, yes, they are more sleek and design-wise, but the fundamental design remains the same. And the reason being, we need these kind of important studies. I'm not saying computational is important, but experiments also. And Ruth has pointed out when he was speaking that experiments are not always possible with everything. For let's say, like each and every facility, you need you need some kind of testing. Either it could be computational or experimental, but everybody doesn't have that like those labs or those wind tunnels to test. So that's why we take this computational approach in that case. For let's say startups or like new companies who want to come into electric vehicles and all these things, they need that kind of facility. So that's why computational field becomes really, really important. And with DNS, which is the most like highly like the most accurate and highly computationally expensive, it would take about 2070 to finish this whole full aircraft simulation, I would say. Um, there's another problem to classical supercomputers, that the classical supercomputers will reach their electricity limit, meaning that currently, like you see I'm not sure how many people in the audience have seen a supercomputer, but it's particularly like a room that would be like, you can fit like close to like 100 to 200 people in. It's that massive for a room where the supercomputers are placed, and then there's cooling and everything involved. So the electricity requirements for running these supercomputers are immense, I would say. Currently, yes, we are able to support because we are in, let's say, petascale right now. But when we go to zetascale, where 10 to the power 21 operations or flops, as we say, are involved, it will take about like so much electricity that will be equivalent to 4 times the daily need of San Francisco. Um, um, so it's really a very difficult task to get these heavy simulation and highly accurate simulation done. So the motivation behind BosonQ Psi is to actually use this disruptive field of quantum computing and bring into multiphysics simulation. And the reason being, quantum computers are theoretically proposed to be much more powerful than existing classical computers. I agree that like current generation of quantum computers are equivalent to what we had classical computers in like 1940s and 1950s. I completely agree with everyone, but there is a scope. Things in the future become present when somebody takes a step forward to it, and that's what BosonQ Psi is doing right now. We feel that if we utilize this power of quantum computing for running multiphysics simulation, lot of industries, lots and lots of industry would be benefited. Taking just one thing is, this whole field of multiphysics simulation is just not academia. It's heavy industry. Every engineering aspect that you can think of involves multiphysics simulation, as pointed out earlier. But this whole industry is worth $17 billion, and it will grow. It will just grow more and more, because just like us, we are a startup in this domain. There are engineering fields, there are space. India is doing great in so many other like so many domains, like space, electric vehicles, electric cars, and not just India. There are so many other um, like great startup companies that are coming, and they need this power of multiphysics simulation to get going. So that's what we are doing here, that we are designing innovative quantum algorithms that can speed up these multiphysics simulations and can reduce the like lead times for the design and optimization studies. And to do that, one thing we want to make sure that we are deploying a user-friendly application. That is, you don't need to know quantum computing, because yes, people are getting acquainted to quantum computing. But somebody, let's imagine a person whose 9 to 5 job is to do simulations on, let's say, a car. He doesn't know, and he doesn't have time to learn quantum computing. And that's what we want to enable him to use the power of quantum computing, but don't, that he doesn't need to know that. Like, he doesn't need to know quantum computing for that. So that's what we will be doing, like with our software, which will be very user friendly, and any prior experience or knowledge of quantum computing wouldn't be known, because everything will work in the back end. So I will now let Ruth continue with the presentation from here on.
Right. So our vision. So like as Abhi mentioned, the person who is doing the simulation doesn't necessarily need to know the quantum computing realm. So we're kind of innovating by using quantum computers for the multiphysics. But we're not only stopping there in terms of our innovation, because what we in our mind is, well, what we have is that we want to use multiphysics simulations. We want to create a multiphysics simulations for quantum computing and have a premier, like a top-notch multiphysics simulation. So in order to do that, we're employing essentially the best techniques that are currently available or even we ourselves are gonna are looking to innovate on different techniques that kind of ensures that okay, so we can have a higher fidelity as well as essentially have an exponential speed up as well. So currently, in I can speak for computational fluid dynamics, there are specific models that people are almost afraid to use because of how computationally intensive it is. So what they do is they go for the RAM, or they reduce models basically. So instead of doing that and kind of settling for the kind of modeling or reducing the complexity just so we can actually use the computers, why do we have to restrict ourselves to do that? And why not use something that like is already in some people can argue right about this, but in some situations quantum computers have already achieved some like has already beat the supercomputers or even the classical computers in certain doing certain tasks. So our mission is to take the multiphysics simulation, make it a major application area for quantum computing. Because if you look at quantum computing right now, the main focus is cryptography and AI or ML. I'm sure, speaking to a computer science background, as everybody, I think most of you guys are in, you guys know that this is where a vast majority of the funding resources is gone into quantum computing. However, if you look at the counterpart of quantum computing, which is the HPC or the high computing community, multiphysics simulation has been the one in the front that has been leading the charge for the HPC, where we have the multiphysics simulationists are kind of, because our problems are so complex, we are the ones who kind of need to kind of pushing for the innovation in the HPCs. However, as Abhi mentioned before by giving the example, there is like if you follow the like a Morse law, unfortunately that law is not going to be exponential, and it's going to kind of die down soon, because all great things has to end soon. And so now what's going to happen is that for quantum computing, we're going to follow the Morse law, where we're going to kind of every few years the computational power is going to double with given the specific volume and such. But we know that already IBM has, I think IBM has been built a 5,000 qubit supercomputer, and in the next few years that's only going to double, because you have many competitors in the quantum field. You have Rigetti, you have IBM, Google, Amazon, and also the startup companies where there are companies out of Australia. I'm just blanking on the name right now, but they are doing kind of leading the hardware aspect as well. So while that's happening, we want to lead our software to be utilized in um vast vast different quantum computing structures, to be essentially, we want to be the leading charge as well on the software end. Um, okay. And so on the front end, we want to be the front runner of the multiphysics simulation. And on the front end, what we want people to see is just the multiphysics simulation. And of course, there are other multiphysics simulations companies out there, but all of them are for classical computers. And only few of them actually can even perform tasks in the HPCs. That's why, like Abhi mentioned, he uses his FASTA code. I use another code, US3D, which is completely different. Both our code is kind of proprietary. Where so because of that, because there is no like not a widely available software that can be run on HPCs, what happens is each professor or each team has to kind of rely either on partnering up with other professors, which people might not like to do, or have to build their own code from scratch. And what they like, everybody thinks that, oh, we're gonna build the best and the greatest software, or even like yeah, essentially software. But what we're trying to do is we're kind of beat out all. So we're gonna have a standard of academia, but be utilized for the company, the industries. Where for CFD, it could be somewhere of like Boeing, Airbus, or Rolls Royce, who makes engines, uh, uh, Pratt and Whitney, who also make engines and such. Let me see. Okay, and next slide, Abhi. So just to give you guys a view of what multiphysics simulation is on all aspect, let's just take an example of a car. So in just inside the car, these 6 different multiphysics simulations are kind of happening before any company that rolls out a car. All these simulations are done to kind of show that, okay, basically the main purpose is driver safety, but also the other aspect is everything's working fine. So if you look at heat transfer for a second, thermal simulation can show the distribution of the heat inside the car. So for that, we can be used that could be used on is our AC system or HVAC system inside the car working well for both extreme cases. So like if it's a really hot day, is the customer going to essentially wait super long to kind of cool the car down? Or other extreme cases, like where I live in Minnesota, we have, well, lots and lots of freezing days, and that's actually like the heating aspect is actually what we really care about here, is because it can go uh, essentially for 4 to 5 months, it essentially stays below 0 degrees Celsius continuously. So we care more about the heating aspect. So once the person gets out of the cold environment and goes into the car, whether or not the HVAC system is efficiently cooling, the warming the entire car as well as the person down. And this simulation kind of help us visualize it. And there's not wasted heating or cooling going into areas that as a driver I would not care about. So let's look at another example of structural mechanics. So here we care about how cars, when they go into an accident, we purposely want them to kind of fail, in terms of we kind of want them to crumble, which kind of takes some of the energy out of the collision, so that as a driver there is no like whiplash motion. There is less of a chance of whiplash motion. So based on that, what we do is we create structural simulations of how cars crash. And now if you look at the experimental side of things, we can do that. Yeah, sure, it doesn't take a lot, but only thing is that, well, every single time we want to test something new, we kind of would have to build a whole new front end of the car and test it and make sure everything is working fine. All of our transducer, pressure, thermal transducer, or whatever it might be, all the control systems inside the cars that are taking the measurement are working fine. And then somehow let a car go run straight ahead, like maybe at 40 miles per hour into a wall, and then look at that aspect, and then look at, oh, we should have changed something else. Let's build another car. So instead of doing that, what we can do is do it everything in a software, where obviously it's not as costly to do it in the software, as well as it's easier to do it, because all you do is like essentially, hopefully you have saved the original file, you can just make modifications and then let the simulation do its thing. For like fluid dynamics, there's a whole thing of fluid dynamics. One portion is the fluid flow, but also another thing is how that fluid flow kind of propagates its noise to the surrounding environment. um so uh, okay. So like for this case, right, acoustic simulation of a sedan interior, including the sound sources as the typical loudspeaker location. So when you're driving a car, you want the car to have the as least amount of noise. And suppose you're on the petrol powered vehicles, because there's an engine, it usually produces a lot of noise. And while you're inside the car, you don't want to feel all the vibrations and the noise when, let's say, you're listening to a nice audiobook, or while you're listening to some good tunes. So this kind of helps us uh, doing this kind of simulations of, okay, so this the on the engine side, let's say, so while the engine is running, it's producing this amount of sound, and for as long as the driver is concerned, how much sound is getting to the driver. Or when, let's say, if somebody is talking to the driver, let's see how loud they had to speak. So because of that, we have to add a dampening system and all that. And to kind of simulate it, we use acoustic simulations. So that's kind of combination of acoustics. Then, if you look at chemical reactions, basically how a gas or even battery powered cars act or operate is basically converting a fuel into energy. And as you can see by the image on the lower left, it's basically simulating one of the cylinder head inside the engine of a chemical reaction of that's happening inside the car thousands of times per second, basically. And now, E&M, how is electromagnetic simulations applicable in a car? So when we when we're in a car and and we decide to, let's say, let's turn on the radio. How does that work? Basically, we there is, of course, we have the radio antenna, but to make sure that there is no interfering with, when we want one specific radio channel, we hate the fact that, it cuts in and out when we're going through various different areas. So our simulations can help kind of simulate these areas and kind of help with the new let's say innovation in the radio technology or the antenna technology. So as it says here, the electromagnetic simulation of a car, cable harnesses, and a windshield antenna to show the crosstalk radiation and interference. So if there's any interference as a as a user or a driver, we kind of hate it. So what we from the modeling point of view, what we try to do is find out a better way or a more efficient way that can, make sure the fact that whatever channel we want to turn on is, you know on without as least amount of disruptance as possible. uh, Next slide, Abhi. Okay, so so the previous slide we looked at just in a car, all the different areas that we use in a car, but that was only on the automotive industry. Now let's look at the wide range where our multi-physics simulation can be utilized. So if you can, as well as how the interaction between these fields can be utilized. So if you look at the starting from the heat transfer and the structural mechanics, you have the Teflon seals that we use to kind of seal things. We look at the both how the thermal stresses structural. So when you apply heat, let's say, usually most substances will want to expand, but when the expansion happens, that essentially kind of restricts the because it's in a confined space, the structures to kind of decrease in size in or create a lot of pressure or stresses at some critical points. And from a modeling point of view, we want to quite accurately model that, because like I mentioned, you can do thousands of experiments and waste thousands of money doing the experiments, or you can do thousands of experiments in the computer with a decreased cost, as well as it wouldn't take that much time to get all the resources and all that stuff. Another, let's look at structure mechanics and fluid dynamics. So this is a really active area currently, the fluid structure interaction, and specifically now we're looking at blood flow, or so basically how a blood flows through your blood vessels, and your blood vessels are not constant rigid essentially pipes. They kind of contract and contract and expand, and we can use this fluid structure simulations to kind of predict when will a stroke happen, when is the whether or not people are prone for that, not diabetes, but the uh, high blood pressure or cholesterol levels. We can kind of sure, you can look at it from biology point of view by looking at genetics and stuff, eating habits and such, but from fluid flow point of view, you can look at it specifically how given this is the size of your blood vessel and this is how much blood flow is going, what are the chances of some obstruction might occur, a clot might occur that might kind of build up things in your brain to eventually cause a stroke or something of that sense. um uh, Another one is the structural acoustic. So now we're doing combination of acoustic and structural mechanics. The combination of that. So the example that you see is basically a beam that has kind of a lot of sound waves coming. Let's say if you are at an airport. So this is actually a real example, especially at the LAX or the airport in LA, because the frequency of aircrafts that are they're like coming in and out are so much that the people surrounding the people that are living surrounding the area have constant noise complaint. And it like imagine you're living right next to a jet facility, and every like couple of minutes you have a jet engine turning up and down, and how annoying that would be, as well as like what kind of like stresses and it would put on the structures as well. So simulating that is a really important aspect as well. On the left side, you have the now we're combining three different: electric, thermal, and structural. So like electric components produce a lot of heat, so then you have the thermal and the structural aspect, and the combination of those two. And it's similar to the thermal structure analysis of Teflon seals in that sense, where thermal creates stresses on the structural side, and vice versa. Well, making the fact that if structures are two structures are kind of like creating friction, it produces heat. So you kind of have the coupling of those two. And then on the top left, you have the structural and electromagnetic analysis of a solenoid actuator. And not only that, but when we look at quantum computing on how they work, they kind of follow the principles of quantum mechanics, where you're working at really, really cold temperatures for the computers to work, like near absolute zero. And to be even before we even make quantum computers or get have reached that stage, people have done many, many simulations on how things would react in such extreme cases. Because, again, instead of doing experiments, you are better off doing the modeling and the simulation aspect. Next slide. So these are only some of the industries that can utilize the multiphysics simulation aspect. So obviously we have the aerospace because of the, like we mentioned, the aircrafts, the fluid flow, but also we have the structural aspect, the heating aspect, which kind of what I specialize in my PhD is the heating aspect, because if you go extremely fast, there's a lot of heat. And when I say a lot of heat, I'm talking about thousands of degrees Kelvin. And even more than that, we are, because when I'm saying like hypersonic, I'm talking about like few kilometers or like tens of kilometers per second. That's how fast I'm talking about. And at that speed, the temperatures reach as high as 10,000, 12,000 Kelvin, that the molecules of themselves kind of split apart, and kind of cause reactions, chemical reactions between the matter, like if it's made of titanium or carbon, the carbon particles will interact with the oxygen or the nitrogen molecule that are in the air. So like in aerospace, we are talking about like from fluid flow to structural to even electromagnetic for like military aspect, how you do the electromagnetic coding to make things be not detectable. Yeah, and there's like the list is kind of endless. Then we are looking at the petroleum, which is where I also, one of my projects I worked on was on harnessing let's say oil of due to fracking, and doing as least amount of damage to the environment while doing that, or even the renewable energy, wind turbines, solar panels. For solar panels, we look at how the transmission of solar energy is kind of converting into our electrical energy. And for wind turbine, obviously that's purely on fluid flow as well as structural to make it long lasting. Chemical manufacturing, as we just saw in a car, basically that's combining in like how to get as much amount of energy, for when we're talking about in a car, from a fuel, as get as much amount of energy and reduce the byproducts that are produced by it. And in terms of the batteries that we talked about, like Tesla has been spending so much money on batteries because to make it as efficient as possible. talking about Tesla, we have the automotive industry that I just talked about, biotechnology, where the as you guys can if you guys follow the Nobel Prize just recently, the CRISPR or gene editing or kind of won the I think the medical side or the biology side of things in the Nobel Prize. And for that as well, before that was a thing, before they were able to actually do the gene editing, there were lots and lots of simulations done because gene editing is not easy, as most people would say. And also we talked about astrophysics. So when we look at explosions of explosions of stars or nebulas, those are all fluid simulations. And basically looking at our electromagnetic field or its electromagnetic field, and suppose there's like a big sun burst, a radiation burst that's happening at the sun, how our electromagnetic kind of the electric our electromagnetic shield that is going to stop the radiation, the sun's harmful radiation. Next slide. Oh, and yeah, these are the references. Thank you guys. And I see that there are a couple of questions in the chat. And okay, here, let me go all the way to the top.
So, thank you, Ruth, for the great insight into our vision and mission, and also the multiphysics simulation. So, I hope that through this talk we have made many people like clear of what we do and what we are about, because this explaining all these things in maybe like the videos that you have seen or in the things that we write in LinkedIn and in our website, it might not be very apparent. And I think so this was a great opportunity through QCI. We are able to motivate a lot of people, not only in multiphysics domain, but as well as in quantum computing domain, to start looking into this exciting field of multiphysics simulations, and hopefully with BosonQ Psi. So thank you. And we are happy to take any questions now.
Okay,
Right.
let's
Lovely. Thanks a lot, Abhishek and Ruth, for this wonderful thing. One, first of all, it's just like I can see in the chat also. It's just insane to think about the potential here, right? This could potentially become a game changer because of this impact across industries, and like always working on something that horizontal that fits across industries. Like you were mentioning, the total addressable market size itself is $1 trillion, right? Like that's just mind-boggling to even think about this thing. All right, thanks a lot for this wonderful presentation. Now let's quickly go through the questions. Yeah,
Mhm.
are you guys able to see the chat window, or you want me to read it out loud?
It would be great if you can read it.
Okay, I'll do that. All right. So first one from Uday. Do we have quantum computers powerful enough to run those quantum algorithms at present?
No, that's a straight answer. Reason being, it's just growing, and but this that doesn't mean that we will stop. Like
Right.
the quantum computers are enough. Like it has enough potential even right now to start developing these kind of softwares. We can maybe in next 1 or 2 years, maybe we can address small problems, like smaller size problems. But to do something like LES and DNS we talked about will take innovation and great things or great strides in quantum computing itself.
Right. And
Nice.
to add a little bit to that, sorry, Sam, is that so from CFD aspect, yes, the straight answer is no because of the high computational costs associated with it. But if you look at chemical reactions, Google, I think about a month or two ago, released a paper on essentially they were able to simulate a chemical reaction, full-blown chemical reactions. So in that term, so not maybe in like fluid CFD or computational fluid dynamics, the quantum computers are not powerful enough to do that. But multiphysics simulation is a vast field, as we mentioned, and some of those fields we are already kind of taking off in terms of okay, quantum computers are powerful enough, so okay, so that's good. So like I mentioned, Google has been able to do um, chemical reactions, a full-blown chemical reaction based on whatever I top of my mind. I don't know how many qubits Google's quantum computing has, but they're able to do that with whatever resources they have. So in terms of multiphysics simulation, yes, we are starting to, reach the point where we are at the point where we can kind of like, start simulating things at a higher level.
Nice. Okay, so next one I'm gonna take from YouTube, which is this is from Veera. Hey, thank you for the video lecture on physics simulations. Which language you are using for simulations in code manner, and also except IBM Qiskit, what are the other tools being used for quantum circuit? Huh.
Uh, Good question. So one thing I would apologize that I cannot give a lot of information, but there are a lot of languages, and we have that freedom to choose any of those because language is not a restriction. Yes, which architecture we choose is very has been carefully thought about because there are some quantum architectures which showed promises in near term, but not really in far future. So that was something that we did try to, but I'm sorry, I'm not able to. I wouldn't be able to answer anything deeper than that. I apologize for that.
Okay, so if I may add, so even if in the hackathon, when we were deciding what kind of language to choose, like we have kept it open. So the problem statement is important. Based on the problem statement, if you want to use QDK, if you want to use Qiskit, that's really up to the participants to explore, right? All
Yeah,
right, great.
yeah, that's important. Yes, for the hackathon, we have kept it open for everyone.
Right. Okay, cool. Saurav has asked a question, which is how many qubit QCs are required to run the multiphysics simulations, or is it possible today? It's kind of similar to the previous one. Yeah. But specific to qubits, this question is, yeah.
So IBM currently has few small open source systems the 2 qubit, 2 qubit, 5 qubit, and 15 qubit, if I'm not wrong. So we can actually test small problems in there. The test size won't be an actual simulation that we currently do in classical computers, but it is enough to do those small test problems and show proof of concepts as well. So and the good part about multiphysics is it can be scaled up and down very nicely.
Hmm.
So it's something that is something that we have learned through our experience and our PhD and everything, that how to scale a problem from small. So you can run it on small qubit systems and then scale it up to bigger qubit systems.
Right. Okay, great. So then there are like few complementary things. I'm gonna skip that. Okay. Thanks a lot, Felipe, Amol, Raghu, and Vishal. Okay. And I'm gonna go to the questions. Da, 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 da. Okay, so this is from Kedar. So it says, hey, I can understand that QC would make the simulations as accurate as they can be, but naturally the bottleneck, if any, seems to be the accuracy of the model itself. Do such models for scenarios actually exist, which are accurate to real life scenarios? Yeah, good question. Yeah.
Yeah, very good question. That is a definite bottleneck for us right now because even if we write those quantum algorithms, which we can to do the simulations, the accuracy part is not up till what these classical computer can match. So I'm just giving an example. I think so 3 weeks back there was some simulation that I was doing as part of my research, and I had to check even till the 15th and 16th decimal place what my answer is, and that didn't match, and I had to spend another 1 week to figure that out. I cannot expect that in near term with quantum computers.
Abhishek,
Yeah, I
do you
think.
want to continue?
Yeah, sure, I can take over. I think
Define that,
his.
and then what is the way to solve it?
Abhishek, we lost you for like the last two sentences, I guess. Can you repeat
Yeah,
that?
you.
That 16 decimal point after that.
Oh, yes. So 16. So I was doing the 16 decimal thing, and it didn't match, and I was basically I had to continue for one more week finding why my 16 decimal is not matching with my previous simulation. So yes, that is definitely a bottleneck. One thing that our team has started to look into is first quantifying that okay, this is an error. Then also then how much is the error? How much is the error? And then what are the ways to solve that error? So through error estimation, and those are other things. So we have started to look into those things, but something which I feel is a very challenging part of quantum computing. And if you would like to add something on top of that.
Yeah, so like as we mentioned with the simulations, we are doing a little bit of modeling. So there is inherent to the models, there are some of these estimations or like errors attributed with it. So when you go to quantum computing, you have more errors attributed because of the whole calculation aspect of it. So from the quantum computing aspect, we tried there are many other algorithms out there for the error estimation and kind of reducing the error. And from the from the modeling aspect, like you mentioned, we can use a higher fidelity,
Mm.
which essentially mean more accurate models. That's basically closer to the real life thing. And DNS, what we talk about is the direct numerical simulation. That basically is real life, because in there, what we do is every single iteration, so like every single time step, we solve the exact equation. Until that equation is not solved, we don't go to the next step. Whereas the other ones, we kind of have tolerances. Like if it gets below this, you can go to the next one. Whereas
Mm.
for the DNS, we kind of solve for exact solution.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you. So one question from YouTube, which is, are you building a product similar to ANSYS, the D-Wave ANSYS? Are you guys aware of that?
ANSYS as in the company, I think so.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Uh, Not to go into details, but ANSYS is doing definitely great work, and we have done our multiphysics through ANSYS. But yes, ANSYS uses something which is more of industrial acceptance,
Engineering. Yeah.
like volume code, um, and finite volume can go up to like second order accuracy. You can think it will be similar, but it's too early to say, and they are a
Mm.
big shot, and we are just starting. But yes,
Right.
we have our own ways to do better things, I would say.
Right. And to add a little bit on that, ANSYS is currently not that many people in academia use it as well, because of it not it's very difficult for answers to kind of go ramp it up to HPC, where to kind of do partitions to essentially divide up the domain so that we can use multiple processors at a time. Ansys doesn't give you that much control, but what we from our point of view is, yes, we want to make a simulation product that's utilized in the industry, but not only in the industry. We want to target the academia as well,
Mm.
because instead of different groups using different codes, and sometimes their results don't match because they're using different techniques or whatever might it be, we want to
Mm.
create like a uniform code that the industry and the academia uses, and it will really help out the industry because they'll get the accuracy that the academia is getting, because they're usually in academia you're doing a much higher, like a much accurate work than the industry.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Cool. All right. So Abby, if you're here, if you can unmute yourself and ask a question, because like I see a couple of questions from you. If not, I'll read it out. Abby, are you here? All right. So I'll read it out. Right. So the first one is there open form console needed here? I mainly used ANSYS for FEM and FEA. And the follow up to that is I've mainly done turbulence rally on vortex, means like on a nozzle through SCIS. So it'll be a simulation or actual analysis of a component. I'm not sure if the question made sense.
No, I'm trying to grasp what.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, I can answer the first question. So it is similar to OpenFOAM or
Mm.
ANSYS FEA FEM methods that Abby has used, but um we are not kind of recreating what open form is. We are trying to use our own knowledge on talking specifically now about CFD, using our own knowledge on different methods. So you have like the finite difference, volume, finite element, as she mentions, the FEM method. What we're trying to do is the back end of what ANSYS currently has.
Okay.
And sometimes ANSYS might not allow you to give you availability of using like the whole full grand scheme of things, because sometimes ANSYS has restrictions on itself, but we try to kind of break down those restrictions. And on the second part, um I'm not really sure what she means by nozzle through cis.
Yeah, that's what science.
But yeah, basically, in terms of, so that's also in terms of the CFD, the models that we talked about, they're turbulence models, and if you we plan on trying to do all the different types of turbulence model, all the way from RANS, which is the base model, to like build up to LES, different types of LES and even DES, to like ultimately reach the DNS portion. So yes, I feel like if your question was will it be able to do turbulence relay on Vortex, yes, but like we mentioned before, we currently are in the startup phase, so it will take us a while to get to that point, because we're kind of building kind of starting with a like a toy problem and kind of building up and up on that. So
Hmm?
it will take a couple of years to get to that stage, but we
Right.
ultimately hope to reach that stage. Yes.
Yeah, nice. Abhishek, you got anything to add, or we'll move on to the next question?
I think so, Ruth. I answered it very well.
All right, great. Okay, so this is from Niranjan. Can you say something about the ongoing projects in BKP?
There are small projects. We are focusing on our, I would say, computational fluid dynamics software right now. We have, as we just like recently started, and that is like the specialty from me and Ruth as well, because we know that field very well inside and out. Not I would say then more than an expert, but enough to do this, like carry on this whole big BQP with us. So for now, I would say in near term it is computational fluid dynamics, but hopefully in future we plan to expand it. And definitely even in CFD, there's so much interesting things coming out every day that it's sometimes difficult to incorporate each and every aspect. One thing I would say that is for a lot of people who are actually in quantum, they are very much interested in AI and ML.
Hmm.
And CFD is getting to a point where AI and ML is becoming an important term in CFD. So probably that is something that we will look into future, but that's currently where we are.
Okay, nice. Okay, so the next couple of questions are more related to quantum, but let's see if you can answer. So one is how difficult is it to maintain decoherence for a long time for QC to work, and other strategies to maintain it. So that, yeah, that's a broad question.
Um, I, uh,
Unfortunately, like we mentioned before, we come from a multi-physics point of view,
Okay,
so we might not necessarily have the technical knowledge for quantum
right.
computing, but it's definitely I think we do have a couple of our quantum computing people from the technical team, I think, in this chat. So if it's something that they have not thought of, I'm sure we're gonna bring it up in our next meeting.
Right. Okay. Cool.
yeah,
Okay. So, very fundamental question: why quantum computing? From
great, great,
yeah. Yes.
great question. I would say I was waiting for this kind of question.
Yeah.
I want to give a background on why quantum computing before answering that question. Lot of people here, I think so, more or less have heard about GPUs.
Yeah.
And when I was a kid, I hear that a lot, and I wanted to have one because I wanted to play FIFA and all these big games. I never knew that this like this whole thing would actually come into multiphysics simulations, and it actually did. Like I would say about 2008, 2009, when I read the literature, that's where I see this whole field of GPU programming came into being. It is very unfortunate to see that the multiphysics simulation in whole community never got adapted to GPU computing. They published in academy and everything, but it was very slow. I like if people follow me on LinkedIn, I recently, like last week only, I completed a hackathon which was basically on uh, GPU programming. So basically, I took the code, the big legacy code we talk about, and took the first attempt to make it a GPU code. Because what is happening is these big supercomputers that we used to use when I just entered my PhD, we used to use like 6,000 supercomputers day in, day out. That supercomputer went away because that was a purely CPU supercomputer. Now the generation is for CPU, GPU. Um, and multi-physics community like lagged behind. There's new supercomputers now everywhere in, I would say, in all the national labs in US, in everywhere, I would say. Even India is now planning these big supercomputers, which are CPU, GPU. But multi-physics community is slow to adapting. I'm not saying that they haven't, but not as a community, we lag behind. So we made sure, me and Ruth and Hassan understands that problem as well as now our team, that we don't want the same thing to happen with quantum computing, because quantum computing will come. The revolution has started. I would urge everybody to not take this like as granted, oh, this will take like 5, 10 years.
Yeah.
It, the thing has come. That's why QCI is there. That's why now BQP is there. That's why big funding is coming through. And we don't want that multi-physics community lag behind in this race also. So that's it.
Very nice. Very nice. Ruth, you got anything to add?
No, I think Abhishek kind of summarized it pretty nicely.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was very nicely put. Okay. So one more thing, this also ties to why you started BQB in the first place, right? So which is Amol's question. How did you come up with the idea to build this startup?
Oh,
All right.
yeah, that is an interesting story. Actually, there was this article published by Quantum Daily on us where they briefly
Yeah.
mentioned about this story.
Hmm.
That I came back to India because of this whole pandemic thing, just taking some break from my PhD. Like I'm still doing my research, so I was up one night and I was like literally just seeing my monitor and the code was just running, and my dad came in and he was like, let's you have been working, and let's have some chat and take some rest. And I was like, sure. And it was like literally, I would say it was just like a morning coffee, like normal routine. And they asked, what are you doing? Like, what's going on? Why you are like so worked up? So I said that my simulation is taking so much, and I was using the quantum computer back in the university. So
Hmm.
I was like, sure, this is going on and everything. And then he asked, okay, so you are just like literally seeing the thing moving, you're not doing anything else. So I said that I'm learning this like field of quantum computing on site, like I'm just taking few courses also. So then my mom said that, okay, so is it like related? And that thing sparked my mind. I was like, I never thought about that, but it could like it could be something great. And then I gave it like a month or two. I thought about it, I worked out, and I see a clear gap. The gap is again what we really pointed out here, that we need this much computing power, but we don't have that. What is the next? It's quantum computer. And
Right.
approached Hassan and Ruth, and uh, we like I have brought like 100 ideas to them every time, and these people are very good in critically thinking what is going to go and what is not going to go. So they are like a filter, and these guys really like the idea. They said that this is worth doing. Ruth also, he's in the same place as me. He also uses these supercomputers, and his simulations are very big. So he understood the problem more closely, and Hassan had this higher level view, which he always has. That's why he's the chief operating officer. And then the last, I think so, check mark was from Josh, because he has experience working in startups. So he said that people talk about AI ML. That is a big deal now. You get a lot of funding in there and everything. And quantum computing is something new,
Hmm.
exciting, and disruptive. It will soon come into the picture. I think so. This is a great. And then we were like, okay, let's start BQP. So that's how we were basically formed.
Very nice. Ruth, what was your first reaction when Abhishek shared this idea with you?
Um, I mean, like, so Abhi and I kind of go way back in terms of you spend many nights just talking about because of our like CFD background. We knew at like some point in our life we are gonna kind of start kind of some form of like CFD company together, because we've been talking many nights where okay, so we like we would just talk about how's the research going and stuff, and then we would just go into a basically area of what restrictions we currently have and how we like kind of try like what other people have tried doing to tackle those um restrictions. And yeah, as Abhi mentioned, he brought the idea of quantum computing. And as most of the times in the beginning, I'm like, well, it's something that I don't know much about in the beginning. So I was like, okay, it's something that like looks interesting, but I'll definitely need to look more into it because I don't have the knowledge. So I don't want to kind of disregard the idea from the get go.
Hmm.
So I looked more into it and I saw the develop how quickly how much it has developed already in a short period of time. It has been like the hardware portion and like the growth and how much funding is in it. That kind of shows the like how much people are expecting or even like uh, putting their resources into developing this new technology. So
Hmm.
I saw as like from a CFD person, I was I once I realized that I became really excited because I saw that okay, so this can get us one step closer to modeling or like well have as least amount of modeling, which is kind of like synonym for estimating what happens in the real world. Because my vision is to like if let's say somebody wants to see like, oh, I wonder what the car or what the floor on this building is, and like if I could do like have a we worked on a project where we want to have a wind turbine on top of like let's say skyscrapers. um we want that kind of project to be like readily available. Like we only want people to have the idea. We
Right.
want our software to kind of handle the like creating from the idea to the working model. Because like I mentioned about the wind turbine on top of a building, that's one of the projects that Avi and I and a couple of other friends worked on. Because like we mentioned, we worked on many projects and this was one of them. So I could definitely see like thousands of other students, I would say,
Right.
who have great ideas, but then we don't want the simulation
Right.
to be the downside of like, oh, I guess we can't really do this because it requires this, and this.
Hmm.
So I guess we can't do it. So we want to kind of break down that barrier.
Very nice. Nicely put. Okay, guys. Final question. I know this will continue forever if we have to like
Yeah.
keep. So a couple of things. So one final question, and the next thing is an announcement. So the announcement is. So I've just put up the chat group for Quantum Winter. So if you guys want to continue chatting, please join that group. Abhishek and Ruth are part of that group as well. So we'll continue the conversation through chat as well. So the final question is. Yeah, this is from Amol again. So, do we need to have a solid understanding of physics to work on multiphysics simulations? Hmm.
I wouldn't say that you necessarily need physics. You need an engineering background, and you can basically decide to have one domain. You can target one domain. Like for example, me and Ruth, we I think so. Both of us, when we initially started multiphysics, uh, we started before we got like to the course that was offered at our university. We basically started from I think so CFD and then did a bit of structural. I was actually going into a very different field when I was applying for my PhD. It was something as aerothermoacoustoelasticity, so mixture of like 4 or 5 fields. But to answer the question again, like you don't have to be specifically have a background in physics. You can be an engineering student and you can decide that okay, I will take up like this a particular domain of physics, multiphysics, which is basically engineering field. One thing I would like to say that when you're practicing multiphysics, you need that strong background of mathematics, which is very, very important.
Hmm.
Other than that, uh, anyone can learn everything if they want to. That's
Yes.
what I would
Yeah,
say.
yeah, that's very true. Nicely put. Okay, Ruth. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. So like as we put for the multiphysics point of view, yes, we are looking for people that are, not only from like one physics point of view, but that can be from engineering point of view. But we also have the quantum computing aspect as well. So we're looking for both the like people can come either from like multiphysics point of view, where they can be an engineering student or even like any form of like physics student with a really really strong mathematical background, or they can apply as a quantum computing person. Because well, quantum computing is the backbone of our company. So we need people that have really good knowledge about quantum computing as well. So we kind of have like a two different positions
Mm,
currently open.
yeah. All right. So this also goes to one of the long-standing discussions, like we at least have internally, which is, Elon Musk has made this first principle-based reasoning a pop culture referent of sorts, right? Oh, physics-based reasoning and stuff. But like there's one step below that, which is even deeper, which is math, right? So which is what you guys are talking, which is like if you have an engineering is nothing but like looking at things in a very logical state of
Right.
flow, and having a mathematical background usually helps, right? So yeah, so a simple what about biology? Please. What about biology? We all do not want on work on binary. Well, that's why we are talking about quantum. It's not binary anymore, right? Okay.
But yes, there is computational biology as well.
Yes.
I think so. Hassan knows it in our team. He's currently like working on that biochemical side of the world.
Right.
Computational biology is also one of the aspects. We don't specialize in that. When it would have been back in like 10th or 11th grade, we would have thought about it, but um, not now. Not nothing to comment on that anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I know like a lot of my friends here are from like pharmaceutics. Or they're doing their masters or PhD in pharmaceutics, and there's this whole thing about like I constantly listen to them that there's so many drugs and polymers and stuff that are out there, but they don't know which one to choose because it's just so much that you are almost guaranteed to miss. Like you're definitely not gonna pick the best solution because you're definitely to miss some of them. So quantum computing can definitely, or just the simulation aspect from computation biology or computational pharmaceutics can definitely help with that, as well as new formulation of drugs. Like,
Mhm.
so even the pharmaceutics company
Yeah.
are using computational modeling for this aspect.
Yes. Yeah. Lovely. Okay, guys. Thanks a lot for doing this, first of all, and people who have joined us either here or on YouTube. Our first session starts on November 7th, 8:30 p.m. IST again, and we'll be putting up the posters tomorrow. A very very interesting person who's doing like just finishing off his PhD in Stanford. An Indian, like he'll be giving the first talk. So it'll be a lecture series where we'll like try to bring in people who are like the who's who of multiphysics domain, right? So as a community, we are trying to learn, and Boson is one of the exciting startups that I'm really kicked about. And like, thanks a lot for doing this. Thanks a lot for building this in India, and thanks a lot for coming up with this and following through the idea. Right? A lot of people come up with the idea. Like parents ask the question, like that's what parents are for. And then from that question, like taking it all the way to this level is a great thing, and putting together a team. It's insane. Okay. So let's continue doing this. And November 7th onwards, our first session starts. Hope to see everyone over there. If you guys haven't joined our the WhatsApp group, because it's easy for us to keep communicating faster on WhatsApp group. So please join over there. All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you everybody
So,
for
yeah,
attending the talk.
One and all for joining in.
thank you, Abhishek. Thanks to and entire BQB team. Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys.